Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today as we have a discussion on a topic that's near and dear to my heart, water loss conservation and recovery. Today, we're going to have a highlight of a state-run program that has implemented leak detection and water loss recovery effort grant days to its utilities in an effort to help them mitigate and reduce water loss across the state. So we've got several panelists here that'll join me. Before we hop into that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about McKim Creed and who we are, so you can understand from that perspective how we play a role in this process. So today we're going to go over loss conservation and recovery. Run program from Vermont, VDEC, has been helping state for last 8 years now, and so we've been a part of that program. McKim Creed is an engineering, surveying, and planning firm. We were founded in 1978 and have about 25 offices and over 800 employees. We've been working the VDEC program in Vermont for a little over 7 years. We have a full in-house team that focuses on water loss services, from design and engineering services all the way to the leak detection and water loss component, which is where our main focus is going to be today. I am Tony Popolo, the water asset management division of McKim Creed, the operations manager, and our focus is on water conservation and loss recovery. I'll introduce our panelists. I'll let them introduce themselves, and we'll start with Joshua from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation.
Hi, everybody. Joshua Lockhead. As Tony said, I'm with Vermont DEC. I'm in the drinking water division with the capacity program, and I am the project manager for our leak detection program. And I've been in this role for about 5 years now.
Thanks, Joshua. And then we have got two panelists here that are from specific utilities that have been engaged in this program for a few years at least, and have benefited from some of the grant days that VDEC has provided them. Rob?
Rob Giotti, I'm the town manager for the town of Dorset. It's a small town in southwestern Vermont, and we have a water utility in a small village. And we were fortunate enough to work with McKim Creed and Josh at the state to kind of learn what resources are out there, and it's been great.
Thanks, Rob. And then we have Aaron, who has been part of the program for the last couple of years as well, and tell you a little bit about his system.
Yeah, I'm Aaron Martin. I'm the Director of Public Works for the town of Essex. I guess you consider us a medium to large distribution system. Got about 3,500 connections or so. We're part of Champlain Water District up here in northwestern Vermont. And yeah, we've used this grant program before, especially to great success last year. And we look forward to working it again in the future.
Excellent. Thanks, fellas. And we'll hop back into some of your more specific experiences and efforts with this program here in just a minute. But first, I'd like to dive into what we're going to be focused on today, and that is water loss. And so looking at that holistically, what's the problem here? There's a lot of water loss that's been lost across the U.S. due to poor infrastructure. And the main focus for today and the way this program has been outlined is to really help address the real losses and what sort of impact that has on utilities across the state of Vermont and others that can benefit from this. So, a couple of stats here, but the main point that this information is driving is that the real losses mainly occurring from main breaks or other leakage within the water systems is causing a huge impact on our ability for conserving a natural resource that is very precious and quite frankly taken for granted. And so we work towards making sure that all of the water that is pulled from these natural resources or purchased from another neighboring utility production client is making it to its final destination without having any inefficiencies within that system. And so we do that through various methods with water loss control and recovery. The first portion being network monitoring and data analysis. Essentially, we use flow and pressure monitoring and DMAs or pressure zones, as well as remote acoustic sensors to help identify areas within the systems with inefficiencies or potential leakage, quantify them, and then drive the efforts at the field level to help identify those, remediate them, and document information for historical use and planning in the future. And so on the water loss DMA networking monitoring front, we use insertion meters and telemetry units. Sorry, there, one slide ahead. Just a second here. Here we go. A few of these items here that I'm showing, insertion meters across the system to help identify and break these systems down into smaller, more manageable fronts to help identify water loss and drive the leak detection field investigations to be more efficiently processed and put into locations where they're going to be beneficial for the return on investment. And then the next portion of the equipment that we use that's shown here are the acoustic devices that we help then hone in and pinpoint where that leakage is occurring within the system, using sounding devices and correlators to then show the exact locations for where the leak is occurring so that the utility clients can repair those leaks and mitigate them for improving their water loss situation. And so these are the methods that we've used within the program with Vermont to help these utility clients to understand what is the best role for them moving forward and what practices would be most efficient for their systems in identifying water loss. So before we dive into a little bit of the information about how we've done that and the results from that, we'll let Joshua tell us a little bit more about the program that Vermont has developed and how it has been outlined to help its utility clients as a launching point for identifying those methods within the leak detection realm that is best for them.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, as he mentioned, this program has been going on for a little bit. It started, I'll give some history on it. It started in 2014. I think McKim Creed joined up in 2015, and they've been with us since then. Tony, if you could pull up my PowerPoint.
Got it?
Sure, thanks. That's one thing that I want to kind of indicate is just how small Vermont is. Vermont has 409 community water systems, and only 7 of those are over 10,000 users. EPA, next slide, please. Yep, thanks, Tony. So EPA qualifies a small system as under 10,000. We only have 7 that are over. More than half are under 500 users. And that oftentimes is a single operator, sometimes a volunteer operator. Many of our systems are what I almost dub as micro systems, and they need a lot of help. So in 2014, the drinking water launched its capacity program and started kind of taking off as far as programs to develop that can help water systems. And through a survey and through general conversations with water systems, leak detection kind of came up as something that they need help with, something that is valuable, but the operators just don't have time to do it. And so that kind of started the program, and it is kind of developed into what it is now. And I'll give kind of a quick overview on how I run it. I like it's pretty hands off for me, which is fantastic. I don't like to micromanage. So what I do is I do a general solicitation, usually a month or 2 months ahead of time. So in Vermont, winters are fun, but you can't do anything. So our working season is over the summer. So we have about 3 or 4 months that we can actually really do anything. So for the most part, we do leak detection every summer. So I send a general solicitation out. I get my applications back, and I split up. So I have a certain amount of money that I'm able to use, and I ask for a daily rate from our contractors. McKim Creed gives me their daily rate. I divide that by my money, and that gives me my amount of days of service I can allocate. And so what I do is I look at the applications that come in. On the application is a request area, because some of the larger systems, like, they have a lot of ground to cover, but they really only want to check out a few streets. And so I can give them a smaller amount of time. Other systems come in, they every year they apply, and it's the whole system, and I'll throw them a few days if I can. And the days I can allocate 100% depend on the amount of applications I receive, and then the amount of requests as well. And I try very hard to be pretty fair about it and to give timeout days, allocated days out, especially if it's a system that has never used leak detection before. But I do tell every system, apply every year, because there's no reason not to. I try hard to give out time, and if it works, it works. Both Dorset and Essex have applied, repeatedly, and that's fantastic. I'm glad to be able to help them. And so once I get my applications kind of processed and my days allocated, I send over the contact information, days allocated to Tony, and then he schedules it, comes up, and then they do the work, and then I get a report back as part of the deliverable program, and the reports are fantastic. They give me a lot of information as well. And then part of what I do is then I follow up later with systems to say, what's the plan with the leaks? And this is kind of run into people that are hesitant. They say, well, if a leak's found, I have to fix it right away. I don't have money to do that. I can't do that. We do not require you to fix it immediately. We want it fixed. So if you do not fix it immediately, which most systems do, then there must be a plan in place on how to address it. So we kind of follow up on that. Yeah, I'm thinking that might be. And I'll mention 2020 was a weird year, so we took that year off. 2021, we actually ended up doing a spring and fall system, and our leak detection program has been kind of running now for a number of years, and so it's become somewhat popular. And when I first started, I was averaging about maybe 15 or so applications each time, and now I'm up into the 20s, which I think is fantastic. Tony, any talking points for me to chime in on?
Yeah, great, Josh. So a couple before we dive in. Yeah, before we dive into some testimonies from Rob and Aaron, their experiences on the system, when it comes to the program, what is some of the initial concepts that brought about Vermont to understand that this was the way they wanted to move towards applying some of these grant funds rather than any other ways they did things for the water loss perspective?
So yeah, I kind of mentioned the idea kind of came about from the survey and from talking to operators, and it was really one of the first programs in the capacity group to come out to be able to help. We just there's a lot of engineers on our team, and we knew internally that there's extreme value here, and that's water loss is a big issue everywhere. Not as big of an issue it is as in the Southwest, but we still have drought conditions up in Vermont. And I used them for a number of times. One of the feedbacks we got from the leak detection surveys was, you saved our butts this time. Because there was one system that their reservoir they couldn't keep up with it. It kept going down, 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 and they're getting very close to needing to bulk haul. And they happened to apply, found a few big leaks, got them repaired, and then reservoir rebounded from that. And they apply every year, and it's once again one of those, like, it's a very small system, single operator. He just can't handle it. So we knew that the value with this is extremely large.
Yeah, and so when you talk about value, one of the things from our experience in Vermont is that water is pretty readily available in a lot of these locations, and generally at a level where it doesn't cost very much to pull it from some of these natural resources and put it into the system. So it's not really been a primary driver on the revenue recovery front as much as it has been on the water conservation front. And so, with that being the case, have you seen a lot of support for the project across the board from the political state level on that front as well?
I I would love to say yes, but I honestly haven't, and I think it's because we stay pretty small. I don't know that too many people. Vermont is small in that everybody kind of knows everybody, which is one of those funny things. And so I'm sure in some instances people are aware of our leak detection program, but in many instances they're not. I will say we have been doing a better job of advertising our services, and word gets out. And like I mentioned, um, The ones that need dire help, that does raise to the political level. And we have another system right now. It's politically hot. Um, they 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 don't have enough water, and so that one of the tools that we are offering them is our leak detection services to say, before we explore source issues, let's take a look at distribution. Let's see if there's anything going on that we might not be thinking about, so we don't have to go down that road if we don't have to.
Yeah, great point there, because some of the statistics that we've seen across the board is that by reducing your leakage, even a minor amount, you're able to actually supplement the ability to offset your need for additional source
Mhm.
for or water needs and production plants and things of that nature. One more question about the program there
Sure.
is, have you had a lot of difficulty in keeping this program continuing every year? You began in 2014 and it's continued on, other than the little break we had with COVID,
Right.
which still had some funding. We just fit it in at the beginning of the following year there. But we've done this for a few different state agencies across the United States, and a lot of them have, had one or two instances of this, but then fizzled out. And Vermont has really held in strong in continuing this program, and we've seen a lot of benefits from the end users at the client level or the utility level. But just wondering, what has been some of the obstacles there
Sure.
keeping this program going, and what are the main drivers for that you see at the state level?
Sure. The number one driver, which I've kind of alluded to a couple times or mentioned, is the water system. Many of our water systems, can't take this work on themselves. They need the assistance. So we're going to give it to them every year if we can, because the value is just too large. I will say some of the obstacles are in this, um, Vermont loves Vermont things and homegrown things. And I get it. I 100% understand. And a lot of the pushback that I do receive is these contractors are from out of state. I don't want to work with an out of state contractor. And I'm like, well, they're fantastic and they do good work. So I don't know, but that has come up a number of times over the years. And truth be told, like when we RFP, there's not a Vermont company that applies. So it's like, well, we would maybe consider them, but no one's applying for that. But that's honestly, neither here nor there. But that does come up because some of the old school operators really want to stay local in that regard.
Yeah, and we've seen some of that as well, especially early on when we were the outsiders
Yep.
coming in. But I think a lot of our staff has been there repeatedly, and so gotten to build relationships with the different operators and
Correct.
managers
Yeah.
of these water facilities, and to help kind of offset a little bit of that, we've also happened to have one of our technicians move to the state of Vermont so they can
I
be a local patron as well.
Yes, I
So
was
that's
gonna
helped.
mention that. I feel bad for poaching your guy. But,
Oh, it's all good. He likes it, and we like to be up there and have a local presence as well. No
it
office there yet, but that's hopefully in our future.
yeah, it's,
So as we kind of switch over from that
sure.
standpoint on the program outline and lead, let's talk to Rob about his experiences with the program as an early adopter on the utility front, and some of the benefits he's seen through the program, and how he's used that as a launching point to go into some of their own initial activities and agendas for them to address water loss.
Sure. Thanks, Tony. So, like Josh had said, Dorset is one of those small. We have 180 connections. Somewhere in the realm of a population of 400 to 600 that services. Some smallish kind of commercial stuff, but generally it's mostly residential. And in the summers of 2014 and 15, there was some droughts down here in southwestern Vermont. Our system is, spring-fed, gravity-fed system, as simple as you could possibly conceive it. But there was significant leakage, and the reservoir was struggling to stay full. And they did get to the point where there was water emergencies. And long story short, that deficiency actually became political and flipped the Prudential Board, who then brought in the town, because the water utility is run by a fire district here, which, not that anybody needs to know that, but it's just another complicating factor. So when the town started to help the fire district, one of the things that just kind of coincided was this program. And there was a general sense of source deficiencies, but not a really good sense of what's in the ground and what's happening operationally. So it really hit a good time frame with what at that point was a really part-time operator, to have some backstopping, to be able to get some technical help to go out there and figure out what's happening in the ground. And as it turns out, they were losing a ton of water. And it got to the point to where early on, as much as 75% of the stuff that was coming out of the reservoir was being lost. And after a few cycles through the program and through contracting with McKim Creed separately, so we could kind of keep our momentum going, we were able to substantially get that down to a point where it's still an old early 1900s system, but it's in much better shape than it was a few years ago in terms of basic service to customers and not having water emergencies and stuff like that.
Excellent. And from the sound of it, really, your system, the water to produce there is relatively cheap. And so the driver there was not really on the revenue front, because there's not a whole lot of loss when it comes to revenue from leakage in the system, but it was really capacity, especially in those drought-stricken times. So beyond just the water loss front and addressing some of those leaks, what are some of the other benefits that you've noticed from the adoption of this program and having continued services to help you all move forward with addressing proactive water loss reduction and keeping those numbers down?
Sure. So I think it helps to give you a snapshot of where you are, and then the year-to-year component with the program is really great, because it gives you a chance to kind of benchmark what you found, what you fixed the previous year to where you are the next year. Beyond that, I think it's with a small system like ours and part-time operators going through the process and having basically the field staff provide some of those I think they call them like leak detection cards, that you can take them to the customer when you have that kind of difficult conversation about a leak that's on a private service line that the utility may have to compel to be fixed, repaired or replaced. And it really adds a whole level of, I would say, professionalism to that interaction, having a third party that has now, identified this leak. So now you've got, the staff operator that knew that there was one there, but again, having somebody else come in, third party, to kind of substantiate, to me, really was a big help with the conversations about, eventually getting stuff repaired or replaced.
Great. And then prior to this program and the adoption of some of the VDEC days that were granted to Dorset, were you doing anything on the leak detection front, or had you had any experience on addressing water loss from that angle?
No, not. I mean, as was kind of shown through the water emergencies, it's a simple system, and nobody was really minding the store before the current management group kind of came in. So.
Gotcha. And that's kind of one of the things that I've applauded the VDEC group for doing, is really not only, do we provide the services while we're there to help find these leaks, and that makes an immediate impact, but we also help share a lot of knowledge on what different services or products are out there for your system, or what may fit best for you all. And I know we've looked at some things there in Dorset. We've done beyond just the acoustic side. We've done a little bit of valve operations to help identify areas with loss and hone in so that we could make the most out of the time that we had on site there. Awesome. Thanks, Rob. I'll switch over to Aaron, who probably has a little bit of a different perspective. He joined the program a little bit later. The last couple of years, he's taken advantage of some days there and added on to that as well. But I know from Aaron's perspective, the revenue side has been one of the things that's helped drive this initiative and kept it moving forward and some of the results they've seen. So, Aaron, I'll let you talk a little bit about your experiences from the program and what you've done beyond that to help drive water loss down. I think you're muted there, Aaron.
I do that all the time. So we started about fall of 2000. We worked with our water supplier, the Champlain Water District, and we had an MOU amongst the district, and we did a satellite-based leak detection survey of, the whole Champlain or water district's service area. So we're part of that, and we ended up with roughly 20 to 30 points of interest where there was a potential for a leak. So I talked with Josh. I said, "Hey, Josh, can we'll apply for this grant. Can we get these guys in to do some acoustic leak detection for us? Maybe just to check out these points that we had in our system. Found out only one was valid, so we moved on from there and decided to apply for the grant again in the fall. And we ended up also having an extra 5 days budgeted, and we found quite a. It was eye-opening. It really was. We got about 20% of our system looked at, and of that, we found about which equated to about 9 gallons per minute, which was substantial. We're a distribution-only system, so we purchase all our water from the district. And it's basically just leaving the garden hose on and letting it run and just letting that bill collect. And I like money, and I like money to stay in my system, and I could find other uses for it. I have plenty of other uses for that money. So we really went to town on it. And back to what Rob was saying earlier about the customer interface, because we found about half of our leaks were on private portions of our system. And just that level of professionalism, you walk up to the client or your resident, and you show them the printout, and you show them, hey, this is what we found. This is what the leak detection says. And most of them, we let them know. Like some of the residential, they're a little less hesitant to repair the service leak, but you let them know, January comes and the water starts surfacing. You got to do something, and really not a good time to be digging in Vermont. So costs usually go up considerably when you're doing winter construction. So everybody was really open about it. And we found quite a bit of savings this round. I think we invested a total of $8,000 in services, and came back with about $16,000 in revenue back to the system. So
wow, that's great.
We plan on applying again, and we plan on doing some more work with you folks later on, possibly this year. So.
Excellent. And that's another great point there, is that, as repeat users and getting some of these grant days, it helps you as you're planning to kind of stretch your budget out a little bit further, because you're getting some time from them that you can supplement with added time to cover more of your system. And like you mentioned here, looking to do the remainder of your system this year. And when those services, pay for themselves twofold, then it's quite a simple decision to make there. One of the points you made there on about the satellite LD follow-up is one of the things I did want to hit on, because we've had several utilities there that have used that service to help drive where they allocate their days to. And we've had some good findings in some of the systems there that have done that same process. But it just kind of shows the multifaceted application for these days that are getting granted out there, because not all of the systems have we had to spend every minute of the time that's dedicated strictly doing acoustic investigations. That's kind of where the thing started, but we found that there's a lot more benefits to helping utilities to become more educated on the different products that are out there, spending some time with the operating staff on showing them the equipment, training them, doing some valve operations. And we've actually spent quite a bit of time on identifying where some of the assets are within the system, some of those curb stops. You mentioned, both of you and Rob, on the curb stop and the private side. It's a little bit different in Vermont, and where your client meters are located within the residence. And so you've got that section of line that goes from the curb stop to the meter that is really considered the client's responsibility or the end user's responsibility. However, that water loss is still coming out of your figures and your budget. So one of the things we've done is working directly with your staff to identify when it is somewhere beyond that curb stop up to that metering point. And then, like you mentioned, helping bring that information to the end client as a situation they need to address. And so, continues to further drive down your non-revenue water. So for you and Rob, kind of talked about the benefits outside of leak detection, or strictly the water loss savings. What other things have you seen, Aaron, there that has been a benefit of the system beyond just the water loss savings? Anything from the utility staff or some of those leaks you mentioned that were just eye-opening, understanding there's a leak in a location that you never would have known it was there to begin with? Yeah.
Those, I tend to like to be a little bit more proactive on maintenance. Like I said, that call at 2 a.m. early February is not something we want up here. You're jackhammering frost, and it's just a real pain. It really is, and the costs are exorbitant. I think one of the best benefits that I've actually had was, in a way, it was convincing our governing board here in the community and the admin staff to show the value of this service of leak detection. And we pushed hard, and we finally got a line item in our capital budget to provide, at least X amount of dollars set aside every couple of years to go in and then perform the leak detection and or monitoring of our system in the future, so we can kind of keep this lost revenue down, number one. But number two, make sure when we know or we are aware of a small leak that just hasn't surfaced, we can plan for that and make that repair and attack it on our terms, not at an emergency situation. So,
yeah, great point there. That's a big item that we see across the board is we find a lot of leaks that are typically not something that utilities may care about necessarily at that moment, leaks that are a gallon a minute or even lower. And so they may not be something that requires immediate attention, but it is good to know that you've got something or an issue in that area that you can plan for before it does get worse. Or if you do see something that results from that area, you can identify, hey, this is something we need to address and see if that's the cause of our problem, for sure. And so one of the other things I wanted to ask between you and Rob is with these leak excavations, is there some data that you're able to pull beyond just, hey, we had a leak in this location about your infrastructure? Are you seeing any kind of information that alludes to certain pipe materials or areas that are under certain stress because you found leaks in those locations that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have been able to get without having some of these services conducted? I'll let you speak first to that, Rob.
Sure. So I think in our case, it was fairly easy that it kind of proved out that most of the service portions of the distribution system were old galvanized pipe that is basically Swiss cheese. And it allowed us to have enough data points that when we were, doing the repairs, replacements, that it was a real systemic issue. That then fed into basically some front end discussions about design engineering and big type system improvements that I think without the data points in terms of we between the grant funded efforts and the outside contract efforts, I mean we fixed something like 40 leaks, and when you only have 180 connections, I mean that's a pretty big chunk. So, and we were finding that it was getting to the point where some real capital investment was going to be needed, and this data allowed us to kind of make that presentation and discussion at the basically the bond vote level, so that we could get a project going. And now we're been fortunate enough to kind of fall in line with some good funding. So again, the timing I think has been great, and the data allows you to make that case for the system improvements.
Great. Would you repeat some of that same sentiments, Aaron?
Yeah. I mean, the age of our system is we own a small kind of distribution system down in what was once an old military fort, which was like 1898. Some of the plans down there. Cast iron. There's some galvanized services in there, all the way up to new construction as of yesterday with PVC and CTS. So we kind of full range. But as for where the leaks are, it was kind of some of it was new construction. So I don't know that we know we have material issues on some of the older parts of our system, and unfortunately, we have a lot of transite in our system as well. So it's another ticking time bomb. But yeah, the material issue wasn't really concerned as much as it was, finding these leaks before they became a problem. And that's the biggest benefit to us, I believe.
Yeah, and you made a good point there on the new construction. Some of the leaks that have been found, and some of the newer things that typically isn't as expected, but that's helpful in a lot of ways. Is there's some warranty that's captured in there, so you can go back and hopefully recapture some funds if it's caught in enough time. But one of the things there is doing the proactive inspections acoustically is a great standpoint. But a lot of things that we do on site with each one of you clients and others that we've visited there in Vermont is preach the ability of using the data that your system already has available to help identify, when you have water loss issues and when it makes sense to actually act upon them. One of the things we go over a lot of times are the different water audit capabilities that are out there and available to you, and using those. And so, helping that information to drive the leak detection efforts for individual systems on an ongoing basis. And that's why I think both of your systems have done a really good job in acting upon expanding the project and even further, and going outside of the grant days to add more to it, because you've seen the benefit there. One last question for you both that'll maybe put Josh a little bit on the spot there. But as residents of the state of Vermont, not considering your utility role aside, are you happy that the state has implemented something like this from a responsibility standpoint on natural resource for water? And do you think it's something as a resident you'd like to see continued, or do you think it'd be a good thing to advocate for other states to implement to help out utility groups? Let Rob go first.
Sure. So I think it's a good example of Vermont doing a really good job of getting the rubber to the road, so to speak, and really kind of recognizing a problem, especially with the amount of small, kind of under-resourced public water systems that they know they have. That this type of a I would say proactive program, I think, is a really good example of a nuts and bolts program that that helps to achieve some of the goals that the Vermont DEC professes that they want us to all meet, which is clean air, clean water, and all that good stuff. So I would say it's a good example. I can give other examples of permission and permitting and stories about source capacity and stuff like that, where it's a different beast. And I think this is a good example of them being proactive and using some relatively small amount of resources to really make some big impacts. So very efficient.
Awesome. Aaron, any thoughts on that as well from the program standpoint? And
yeah, I agree. We got to practice what we preach. Vermont's a green state, and I'm glad the state has seen the value in it and is continuing with this. It's kind of some of these systems here in Vermont, some of the smaller ones, they're well over 100 years old, and they've been held together by some of these old Vermonters that are did their best to make it work and make it happen. And I guess I see the leak detection program here as almost an extension of that Yankee ingenuity. You just got to keep on keeping on, and then this is another tool that a lot of these smaller systems can use to make stuff work for them and make stuff happen for their system in a with fiscal responsibility as well. So I
absolutely.
Program.
Yeah, and to that same effect, I want to share some of the stats that the program, just that McKim Creed, has seen since our involvement there in 2015. So since that point in time, we've completed over 251 days of leak detection activities across the state, touching 75 different utility groups. And some of those being very, very minor and small, 1 mile to half a mile systems sometimes, all the way up to some of the larger systems we've seen there with upwards of 75 to 80 miles of distribution network. But in all, the real information here that we want to look at is we've identified over 200 leaks, and we've saved over 360 gallons per minute. And probably some of those numbers are on the low side. Our early figures for this program are a little bit skewed, but and they're all based on estimates. Some of these leaks that we've identified here have been repaired and shown to be a lot larger than we initially thought that they were. So we've got some more days scheduled for this year, so the program will continue to move forward. And with that same notion, Joshua, how do you see the future of this program continuing to move on and maybe adapt into implementing any other services or assistance for utility groups within the state.
Sure. Like I mentioned before, it's been a popular program. As more and more people, as it continues, more and more of the operators and the systems are aware of it, and so they're starting to apply. We're getting, as things are kind of loosening back up, we're getting back out there promoting, our programs, and I always tout leak detection. So there seems to be a better response to that, and the more we can show that it's successful and desired, we can then add to that program. And we actually have requested more funding for the program to expand it, and we do expect to get that for next year. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Excellent.
And then I was going to mention that the fact that you guys are up here every year has established a pretty good rapport with a lot of these systems, and I greatly appreciate, because I'll chat with Tony and he'll say, hey, the guys have been down to this system, and I know you've given them this amount of days, but they could really use this amount of days, and here's why. And I appreciate that feedback, because I'm making my decisions just based on a paper application, not really the firsthand knowledge. So as we continue it, and as it's been successful, we get more of that sort of data back to expand it even better. Than 1 or 2 days does so much, but if we did 3 or 4, we'd actually really see a big improvement.
Yeah, and we have a lot of data that comes through being on the ground there and seeing it firsthand, and so being able to pass that information back to you for decision making is definitely part of our process to help it move along in an efficient manner. And we see many of these utilities. Everybody wants more days, of course,
Yes, they
as
do.
many as they can get, but the funding can only go so far. But we try to make the most out of it and let you know where those days could be the most impactful from some of the things we're seeing on the ground. Another question for you, Joshua, is from the state level, have you had any other states ever reach out to you to ask about this program, or any networking that goes on to talk about how other states may be interested in replicating something that you all have done there in Vermont?
A little bit, yeah. When I first started, I had a Midwest state contact me and said that they were curious about it. And a large southern state, which I won't name, but rhymes with Mexis, contacted me too, and they were pretty excited about it as well, and wanted my thoughts on something running like that. And that's I always tout how well it has worked for us. I think in different states it needs to be kind of um, run a little bit differently to get what we get from it. Because in Vermont, as we keep mentioning, a lot of our systems are so very small that I can just run it wide open for anybody to apply. Whereas I feel like in the larger states with larger systems, it would need to be directed more towards those that truly do need assistance.
Yeah, and we know Texas is just a little bit bigger than
A
Vermont,
little
so
bit.
it may be different.
Um,
Hopefully somebody from Texas is on the call today and can help see some of the benefits that you all have seen there, and can reach out to you. So with that same notion, is there any advice that you would give to some other states that are looking at a program like this and to initiate something going forward?
Sure. I would say that it's pretty simple, which I think, from a state managing perspective is extremely valuable. Um, it truly is kind of like, I have my funding and I can allocate my days, but it's not a lot of funding really. So like you can get a lot from not so much on the front side, which is extremely, you know, fantastic. Um, so yeah, if kind of that's set it up in a way that works for your state. Like I mentioned, other than my solicitation, kind of divvying out the days and then reviewing reports, it kind of runs on its own, which I really, really appreciate. And so, throw a little bit of money at something and you get a big bang for your buck as far as helping the systems that truly need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we've seen is that, just like Rob and Aaron have taken advantage of adding to this and using it to supplement some of their time. But the impact goes far beyond the single or 2 to 3 days that we spend with these utilities and the results we get on the ground from the education standpoint and just the knowledge that they gain from, what activities are out there for them to branch out on their own and started taking some of those initiatives in-house, whether it's their own utility staff using equipment that we're using and seeing how to use it firsthand, or understanding that there are services like the ones that we're providing out there that are available to them, whether it's in an emergency situation or just in a proactive standpoint. So I think far beyond what the funds would indicate, it reaches a lot further than that.
It truly does, and I get a lot of feedback on that, on systems just really impressed with the amount of education that they receive, and then both with Aaron and Rob being able to be like, we want to run with this, and we're actually going to do a little bit in house, and I think that's great. But yeah, just the general education, and then it also sets up the small systems that can't do it on their own to be like, I'm definitely applying next year.
Yeah, and I think that from the state level, I think that's very important that states could identify that, hey, a small program like this, I mean, the amount of money that gets put into infrastructure, we're seeing it grow every day from the federal level and passing on down to the states. And just knowing that you can take a small bucket of money and put some professional services out there to help utilities that can't do it on their own, or some that may not have had the experience to understand that it's as impactful as it could be for their system to give it a try without that risk on the front end.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So we could take any questions today from the group. If anybody has any, you can put it into the chat. We'll take those as well and hand them out. But in the meantime, Joshua, do you have any specific questions for Rob or Aaron while we're on?
Have I seen your applications yet?
I'm working on it.
Okay, good.
Ditto, same thing.
If I think for a moment, I might come up with something. Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry,
no worries.
sorry to wash on that.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure there was no questions
Yeah.
that you had particularly for them. And then Aaron and Rob, I'll let you all, if there's anything that you want to add to this conversation or have a question for one another as a peer-to-peer kind of panel.
I guess there's a benefit there, and I would recommend this program to any of the systems out there. Even if they could just, they get 2-3 days from Josh, just so they can see the potential of what the actual savings could be if they find even a couple of these leaks, and at least the benefit of what it is, and then just learn to say, hey, this is part of running our system. This is what we need to budget for. This is just another tool we need to put into the budget to run our system. Budget more time every year or every other year or whatever. But I see this as just another tool to run my system.
Yeah,
So
I would echo that. Yeah, I would echo what Aaron said, is that it's you see it as a tool, and we've got some stuff where we're going to be reaching out here to McKim Creed soon for just some, as a tool in the toolbox to look at stuff as you operate the system. And I would also say that I think Josh has done a great job with the application in terms of making it fairly simple and straightforward. And oftentimes that is not the case sometimes with grant applications. And when you're dealing with maybe frontline staff that might be, have a small part of their day that they can try to fill out that application, the simpler the better. And I think they do a really great job of, kind of getting from point A to point B with minimal headaches to get the contractor in there to do the work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we've actually got a lot of benefit out of those applications as well, because a lot of that contains the information for the loss within the system.
Yep.
And so us, the contractor going in, have a really good idea of what this utility is facing from that angle before we even put boots on the ground.
We used to. Sorry, Tony.
No, go ahead.
We used to require a full water audit, which is extremely valuable information. It's great. Maybe one system would actually do it. Everyone would just send it back blank. So eventually you get to the point where you're just like, it's not even worth including this piece. So so we trimmed that, and then that makes it a little bit smoother. Yeah, and then it's more too of I get the request in, and then it's the pass off, and then Tony has the conversation with the system, and he gets a better story on what they're really looking for. And I feel like that's weight off my shoulder on having to try to manage that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've tried to really be an advocate for using those audits as a tool for them rather than something that is intimidating to go through.
Mhm.
And you know, a lot of people don't want to show their loss or put that information in so they see it. And it really helps understand the bigger picture of the utility system. And so showing them that those audits are a little bit easier to go through than they may expect, or how helpful they can be. Because a portion of your application contains some of those same
Right.
data
Yep.
points that you're asking for. So it's not that much harder to kind of go through and fill the rest of the big picture out. I've got a question from the audience that says, what have technicians seen in the field outside of finding leaks that have benefited the water utility? So from my angle, I can easily address that. We've seen a whole slew of different things. Some of the things that we collect are just general infrastructure issues. If we're finding that there are valve lids broken, or meter pits or something like that are damaged, or anything like that, we're able to report that back to the utility and give them not only a location but information about how they could fix those things. But also, we find things in the field all the time like water theft or unmetered usage that are really impacting their numbers. And some people are not quite aware that those things need to be accounted for within your water audits, or if you're accounting your water balance, that just because you're letting the fire hydrant run freely for however many times a week to fill up the local water truck or whatever it may be, those are still things that you need to account for. And so we find some of those that I think are a benefit to the utility system. Rob or Aaron, anything to add to some other things that you've had us report on that were not really leak related?
No, it was good when your technician. It was a second set of eyes out there, of critical eyes who knows what to look for within the water system and operating the system. Hey, why don't you clean that right away of yours, Jesus? Or there's a tree growing here, or yeah, a second set of eyes is always helpful. It really is, at least from an operational standpoint.
Yeah, I know some of the areas we've gone through have been quite rough terrain where some of these water lines are laid at, and haven't been visited in many years. So we've trekked through the woods there. We found a few bears along the way,
Mhm.
but have seen that these are areas where leakage can occur and really go unnoticed.
Yes.
And so, helping identify that and showing that to you, hey, keeping some of these right of ways clean, or these easements, more accessible, will help you in the future to not only, if you have a leak situation, to get in there and repair it faster, but identify if there's a leak in there a little bit sooner than you may
Exactly.
otherwise. Excellent. Well, I think we're nearing the end of our webinar here today. If there are any last minute questions that want to come in, please feel free to shoot them in here. We'll give a couple more minutes for that, and if not, then we'll plan to wrap it up.
I could ask a quick question to Rob and Aaron. From your standpoint, is there anything I can do that's could be more effective, or could also solicit the message better? Like, I know Rob was probably in the program before I had even started. And then I think Aaron heard about it, maybe word of mouth or so. But like, what can I do to get the message out there better? Or from an administrative standpoint, what can we do to make it cleaner and easier?
Yeah, I would say, having had to dabble a little bit into additional source capacity, um, it's not a guaranteed or given or predictable process. It's also a very expensive process. So I would think that any any end user or system in Vermont that you may be aware of that had capacity issues, and was looking at the source stuff, that it would be good to maybe target some of this, the support to them,
Yep.
because I know when we kind of started some of the source stuff, it seemed simple and without much background in it. Ourselves here, you start to kind of go down the road, and sometimes things don't work out the way that the engineers or the frontline staff kind of expect them to, and it's very expensive to get into that process. Versus, if there's some conservation efforts,
Right.
the short money to do the leak detection is available. I think I guess what I'm saying is I wish we had this a little bit before we got into some of the source discussions, because it might have taken us down some different roads in the shorter term, not necessarily in the longer term, but in the shorter term.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
we can
getting
speak to
yourself
that.
out there, Josh, is important. And I'll speak frankly for some of the smaller systems, especially
Yep.
with those real shoestring type budgets. I know they don't have the bench or the bandwidth, if you will, to actually do what some of the larger systems can do. So I encourage you to, like, go to the Green Mountain Show, or I know Vermont Rural Water has some of their own stuff that they do as well, but maybe teaming up, you can get some of those smaller systems under your umbrella as well to kind of get on board with it, because it's a valued program. It really is.
Yeah, and I was going to just say on the funding front is talking about the source capacity and things like that, is we've got plenty of case studies on where we've offset the need for additional facilities to produce water based on finding X amount of leakage within the system, and you can make your water that you're taking currently go so much further if you're being a good steward of it in the way it's coming out now, and maybe offset a lot of funding that's needed for adding supply to your system. Like Rob said, it's not a long-term solution, because population growth is a thing and you have to accommodate that. But as much as you can do that with what you're already producing and pulling from the natural resources around you through your supply, the better off you're going to be to help elongate that as we move forward. Great. Well, I'll wrap things up here. I really appreciate all of you kind folks' time today to join us for this panel discussion, and I hope it was educational for everyone out there that was joining us today, to see that maybe ways that their state could get involved, or if they are at the state level, some ideas that they can implement a program similar to this, and reach out to Vermont for any questions if you need to. Joshua has been a great advocate for this program and resource for others to understand how they can use something like this to help their utility clients within their own states. So I appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you very much. And I look forward to continuing this program and building on it as we move forward.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.